Welcome to another episode of Leadership Lessons. My guest today is Mr. Larry Gritton, and we're talking about leading a legacy organization. Larry, thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
Thank you for having me.
Let me tell you about Larry Gritton. Larry serves as president of the Oneida Baptist Institute in Oneida, Kentucky, a historic school that is one of the entities of the Kentucky Baptist Convention. An OBI alumnus himself, Larry has led the school since 2013, overseeing its mission to provide Christ-centered education to students from a wide range of backgrounds. Larry is also a personal friend and just a good brother and one of the best nonprofit leaders that I've been around. So I'm excited to get to talk to you, Larry. So, Larry, for those who may not be aware, describe for folks what is OBI and share some of its unique history.
OBI is a special place for sure. I tell folks all the time, though, if you want a good, objective, unbiased opinion evaluation of OBI, I'm probably not the guy to ask.
Yeah.
OBI is in my blood, been a big part of my life. Grew up here, graduate, and met my wife here, and have served here now, finishing up 20 years, 13 years as the school's president, but we had a stint of teaching right after college. But it's a unique, special place where kids from all different backgrounds and from all around the world come to be at our school, and the education is what draws them here. But it's much more than that. We point them to Jesus and everything we do, but just a long, rich history, 126 plus years now. The Lord's had his hand upon the work of Oneida from day one. It's an amazing story of God's grace and providence and provision of how he birthed this place. But more than even the ordaining of it, what's amazing to me is the sustaining of our ministry, how the Lord has sustained it through his people, and Kentucky Baptists are certainly a large part of that.
And so, Oneida, for folks who may not know, it's a boarding school. Not all the students live on campus, but a number of them do. Larry, how many students are enrolled at OBI currently?
We've been running right around 350 this school year. That's K through 12.
My goodness.
Pre-kindergarten, actually K4 through 12th grade. So 4 years old through basically 18, maybe as much as 19 years old. About 80 of those are boarding, and all the rest are commuting. So the vast majority of our students are coming from our surrounding community, multiple counties, about 4 or 5 different counties here bordering Clay County that they come from, and kids across the state and across the world. So but 350 total.
350 is I mean, I guess I'm thinking back to when we were going through COVID, and maybe just prior to that, but 350 is a pretty big increase, if I'm not mistaken, from recent years.
Absolutely. It's more than doubled since we came through COVID. First year back from COVID, and we had our dorms back open, we had 170 total kids. Now, pre-COVID, we were running about 260.
Okay.
And so even since, that, we've had a lot of growth. The last 2 years, we jumped from 240 students to 350, so 110 plus in 2 years, and it's taken more staff and folks to be able to accommodate that. But it's really been just a blessing to watch the Lord's plan and design. I think it's been in the works even since before COVID, of kind of redirecting us to our roots and our original mission. What I tell folks, part of what happened here, I believe, with COVID is we've shifted from being a boarding school who happened to have some commuting day students to primarily a commuting day school that happens to have boarding students. But ultimately, we're a Christian school, and the kids are going to be pointed to Jesus, whether they're living in that dormitory or parents are bringing them, or they're riding on one of our 4 bus routes.
Yeah. So, Larry, am I right that you have some kind of a basketball record at OBI?
Several at OBI. My dad coached here, had a lot of success. So it probably helps a little bit when your dad's the coach.
Yeah.
Got a little bit of a license, I guess. I used to think I was open when I stepped in the building, and that I was in range and could shoot from anywhere. But I said that same type of thing to a fellow coach a few years ago, and he said, yeah. When I said, helps when your dad's the coach, he said, yeah, but you still got to put the ball in the bucket. And I said, well, I guess I did have a little success doing that. So blessed that to be a big part of my OBI experience. And really how I look at that now and think the Lord using that to give me credibility, to give me a platform.
Sure.
In Kentucky, in particular, Eastern Kentucky, basketball is so important to people. It's such a way of life. And I moved away to Florida for 9 years. And when I came back, and just the conversations with people here in our community, it reminded me how important basketball was to them, because that part of what they wanted to talk about was not necessarily what's going on at OBI today, but hey, I remember when you played, or your dad, or this game, or that shot, or this or the other. And so I really feel like I've been able to utilize that to enhance my ability to lead OBI, to share with people about what it is that goes on here. So at the time, as a kid, I just thought, hey, I'm playing basketball and having some success and enjoying it with my friends. But I look back now and realize the Lord, he took that and he's using that to now, again, give me that platform.
So you have a lot of background with OBI. Your dad was there. You were there as a student. That you taught there for a while, but then you went on a foreign mission trip to Florida and were there for a few years. How did you come back to OBI as president in the role that you're in now? How did the Lord call you back?
Florida is a foreign country. I'll say that, but we enjoyed our time there, and the Lord used that time to prepare us to come back to OBI and serve in a different capacity. But right around 2012, some people began to reach out to me from OBI, tied to OBI, and say, hey, Dr. Underwood's retiring. I think maybe you should throw your hat in the ring. And my initial response was, I'm kind of happy where I am, what I'm doing. But ultimately, I did finally say to that last close friend that called me with that idea, I said, I will pray about it. And ultimately felt led to submit my information, and went through a process, eventually interviewing with the Board of Trustees. And in the Lord's timing, he brought us here. It wasn't something I set out, looking to do. If you'd have told me when I was a student here, or even a teacher here, one day you'll be back here as the school's president, I probably would have thought that was crazy and it wouldn't happen. But thrilled to be able to just have a small part in hand in, leading in the direction of OBI.
Yeah, well, we're glad you're there, Larry. So OBI has a long history dating back to 1899. I understand there was a kind of a feud connection to the starting of the school, trying to minister to local families where they would get an education, hear the gospel. It's also in Clay County. Clay County, for folks who may not know, is not just a poor county in Kentucky. It's one of the poorest counties in our nation. How does all that legacy, Larry, kind of shape the way that you try to lead today?
Dr. Gray, about 12 years ago, the New York Times labeled Clay County, Kentucky as the worst place in the nation to live. It had 6 criteria they used to arrive at that conclusion. There were several other eastern Kentucky counties on the bottom of that list. I don't agree with that. There's a lot of good here, a lot of great, godly, loving people in Clay County, but there's certainly a lot of challenges, and those same challenges exist all across our country, but I think it's more intense here in the mountains in eastern Kentucky. And so really the Lord just very early on in this impressed upon my heart that our direction should be reaching back in to our community, going back to our roots, for a school for kids and families in the mountains. We love that kids come from around the state, around the country, around the world. But for me, our Jerusalem, as Acts 1:8 talks about, it's right here. It's Oneida, it's Clay County. So the vast majority of our students are coming currently from Clay County. And then some of those surrounding bordering counties were also on that list and will be listed as some of the most impoverished counties in the entire country year over year. Impoverishment just being really an epidemic here. The drug culture seems to be intensified here and off the charts even. And so those are two of the biggest challenges we face. They're generational challenges. I think young people, children in our community, unfortunately, are 2, if not even 3 generations deep into watching parents, grandparents simply live off of the government, not necessarily go pursue an education or a job. They think that's kind of normal or a way of life. So we're hoping that we can break that cycle with young people. And just like in a church, the younger you get a child and begin to have influence and opportunity to minister, the better outcome and opportunity for good outcome that you'll get. So one of the things we did early on in my tenure here as president was to reopen our elementary division to local commuting students. We hadn't had that since the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that growth has happened in our elementary, and that was a great step of faith. The first year we did that, all of a sudden we're looking going, okay, now we've got to have 6 or 7 more teachers for these elementary grade levels at a minimum, and we've got to have more staff, and the Lord blessed us with the people we need. So it starts here at home for us in Oneida.
So, Larry, OBI, for folks who haven't been around in a good while, it's certainly evolved since 1899 in many positive ways. You've kept the mission, and we'll talk more about that. But for folks who haven't visited the campus in a while, what do you wish they knew about OBI today that could be a little different than it was a few years ago?
Appreciate that question. The mission here has never changed,
Yep.
but the methods have. You have to adapt. If you don't, you probably don't continue to thrive as the ministry that God intends you to be. But one of the things I really wish people would know and understand about OBI is that we're not a reform school, and that's been out there for many decades. We do tend to somewhat specialize in young people that have had some struggles, but I tell folks all the time, our students at OBI, they're no different than kids attending public schools in our community or other Christian schools. One difference being, though, with the boarding students, when they live here, the school deals with more challenges, things that mom and dad oftentimes would take care of at home with the child. OBI is taking care of that and dealing with it when they live here on our campus. So we've got wonderful kids that people, if they come to our campus or even experience our choir coming into their church, and they get to see and engage with our kids, and they very quickly identify, wow, those are wonderful kids. A lot of them know and love Jesus, and they're kind and they're respectful and courteous. And so I wish more people realize just how amazing young people are that we have here. I get told all the time everywhere I go, my parents used OBI as a threat with me. If you don't straighten up, I'm sending you to OBI, and that's what they know us to be.
Right, sure.
And again, we've had our share of kids that have had struggles, but we have an amazing student body.
And even our own Kentucky State Attorney General, Russell Coleman, spent some time at OBI. He came back and visited recently and shared about his experience. And he was probably at that time one of those more challenging children, would be my guess.
He was. Russell, it was a blessing when he came, and he brought tremendous word in the chapel service to our young people and told them his story. So every kid that's been here, just like Russell, they have their own Oneida story.
Larry, would folks be surprised to drive up that hill and see some of the new buildings and the soccer field and the track field, things that they just never would have dreamed? You dreamed it, and others have dreamed it, and God planned it, but they never would have imagined that the facilities would look like they do today. Anything you want to say about that?
Absolutely. The Lord's blessed us to be able to transform our campus. We've had 3 major rounds of building in our history. The early 1900s, as we got started, we remade the campus in the 60s, and then now 50, 60 years later, did it again. And even before you get to campus, as you're approaching Oneida, there's almost a 90-degree curve that you hit, and right there in the bottom in the field is our beautiful soccer field and track. And people, you see that, and you're like, well, my goodness, like, what is that? I'm out here in the middle of nowhere, and it used to be a cornfield, and there's this field, and then you turn the corner, and you come up the hill, and there's a beautiful Anderson Hall, historic home on our campus, and Wong Hall, named for Jensen Wong, one of the wealthiest men in the world that went to school here for a while and gave back to us. And then you see Underwood Hall, which is a beautiful dining facility. And so we've been so blessed to give our kids quality facilities that we hope will hold up for the next 5 decades or so.
I wish every Kentucky Baptist could see OBI today, especially those who have years ago went and served for a week in the summer or something like that. A few folks were able to hear the Jensen Wong interview on the Joe Rogan podcast, and about I think about 7 minutes of that podcast, or maybe that was not that long, but he talked about his time at OBI, and
you're correct.
Yeah,
Dr. Kerr, sorry, I didn't cut you off. It's about a 10-minute window in that where he was talking about OBI, and just like you said, I wish more Kentucky Baptists could come and see. We had two volunteer groups here this week, one out of Louisville and one out of Owensboro,
Okay.
and they got to see firsthand what God is doing here. And we had two guest pastors come this week to be in chapel services, and our doors are open to Kentucky Baptists and anyone wants to see what's going on here at OBI.
Larry, one of the things I love about your leadership is that buildings are not everything, and OBI has in many years scraped by, doing the very best they could with what they had to offer. But you've led them to that dining hall is just state of the art. It's absolutely beautiful when you see it. It's like, what an incredible building! Here it is, sits top of this hill in Clay County, and I think for those children that it's probably inspirational when they're in a facility that people have invested in, and they want the very best for those children. Is that part of your vision in updating and upgrading the facilities?
It quickly became that. Coming in here early on, I really had no idea what it would be like with facilities and getting into all this major construction. And the Lord just saw fit, the one thing after another. It all came together, and friends and donors came in place and came alongside us. But my heart is that we have facilities that say to our young people, not only does God love you, not only do we love you, but people that you don't even know, and a lot of them don't even know you, they love you.
Yep.
They've given, they've invested to help us to do this, to have facilities that say to them, hey, you matter, you're worth it. And at dining hall, you mentioned a local electrician working on all the buildings during our construction process. As we were into that building, he said something to me I had never considered, never was, an objective, but he said, this is going to be the nicest building in this entire county.
Yeah, interesting.
And I hadn't thought about that until he said it. And then I thought, well, that probably is right. It's a beautiful facility. Men and women that served before that enabled us, by developing relationships that later on those folks would see fit to send gifts, leave legacy estate gifts to OBI. Dr. Bud Underwood, after Dr. Barkley Moore, who diligently saved money that helped us to pull from endowments and savings to be able to round out these projects. And so it really was probably a 50-year process of all this coming about. It just happened to be, I got to be the one in the last 6-7 years kind of had my fingerprints on it in terms of actually doing the projects.
Larry, there could be someone out there that would listen to this podcast. What's the project you're working on now? I know you continually upgrade the facilities and make them the best they can be. What's next in front of you that way?
Baseball and softball field rehab. They sit in the floodplain and just been ravished by, destroyed really by recent floods. We've had 3 historic floods in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And those fields, we've received some monies and gifts to overhaul those. We're looking to hopefully raise a little bit more and get into that project and bring those back up to speed for our kids. So baseball, softball field rehab.
Well, I think any OBI alumni who has access ought to take a trip over to OBI and just take a look at what things are. I think they would rejoice just seeing the upgrades and how things look. But Larry, we talked about the mission. So the mission of OBI is to provide education for time and eternity. And every time I'm there for a board meeting, you typically have 1 or 2 students come in and share their story. Is there a student who you think kind of embodies the success of that mission? Someone that you could mention to us or share some of their story that, yeah.
Boy, I could rattle off a dozen easily, but the one that's easiest for me to hit on, and I think one of our greatest success stories is very personal to me, and it's not my own, but it's my wife's story.
Okay.
She came here as a 6th grade student from Dayton, Ohio, and her family had some Clay County ties, so they were familiar with the school, but just a very broken situation at home for Angie, and the Lord used OBI as her refuge, her rescue, and the people here became her family, and she met Jesus here. And had she not come to Oneida, she probably not even living today. That would be the reality of it with everything that had happened and continued to happen in her family. But Dr. Barkley Moore, the school's president at the time, he just welcomed her with open arms, and she never paid any tuition for 7 years.
Wow.
And most schools can't do it that way.
Yep.
And the reason OBI is able to is primarily because of Kentucky Baptists that bless us. And I'm sure they got into a discussion when Angie's family brought her to enroll to school of what kind of tuition can you afford? And the answer was none.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't matter. The school said, hey, sure, we can take you in. And it kind of embarrasses my wife. I think I tell her story. I don't typically do it if she's with me in a church or somewhere that I'm speaking, but really just an amazing story of how God used this place to change the course of her life.
And Larry, Angie serves right alongside you. You couldn't do what you do if it wasn't for Angie's work at OBI and her support of you. But truthfully, everyone on staff at OBI has answered a calling. Certainly, your educators, the teachers, the administrators, they believe they have a calling from God to be there serving. Is that true?
That's true. It's a calling. The calling's for a season.
Mm-hmm.
My parents' season here is 20 years.
Yeah.
Our longest ever tenured staff member taught Bible here for 50 years.
Wow.
Our chapel's named for him. Our second longest tenured staff member taught Bible most of his years. He was here 43 years. Currently, we have a tutor on our staff who's been here 40 years. Our business manager should be CFO title, but he's too humble to take that title. He's been here for 37 years. But some folks, the calling's the season's a year or two. And if you're not called here, you better not try your hand here because it won't work. You won't be happy. You won't stay very long.
So you have three former Kentucky Baptist pastors who are now on staff. Probably more than that, but I know of three. You have Frank, who's with you everywhere. He's at WMU, I think, today.
That's right.
And then you have Clay Hurd, who's now leading chapel, and Tony Hall, who's working with you. Those guys and their families, they also answered a call to be there at OBI.
Yeah, pastors beware. I usually recruit from within churches and pastors. We've got several others on our staff that have served as pastors either in Kentucky or somewhere else.
Larry, how do you try to balance the desire to have strong education along with Christian values? How do you kind of work that out in the classroom? How do you help the teachers stay on that same vision? I realize they have an internal motivation that they want to, but how do you kind of keep all that moving in the right direction?
I don't want this next statement to be misunderstood, but we need the chemistry teacher to teach chemistry. Now, we want his or her life lessons and faith perspective to come through in their lessons. So we do biblical integration in everything that we do. And so we reach our kids through our programs, certainly in the classrooms, but I don't like to say extracurriculars, I like to say co-curriculars. They're an extension of our classroom. So athletics and fine arts. And if our coaches and sponsors and people all are doing their job, they are pointing our kids to Christ through the program that they lead. And so again, kids are coming here for an education. It's a Christian education.
Yep.
And so it's Jesus first. But what draws them here typically is I'm coming to get a diploma, graduate, hopefully go into college for most of them. And it is a balancing act. And kids are pretty savvy. They're good at trying to derail you. If you're a teacher and you get in the classroom, they get you talking about other things and current events. And, can we talk about this, pray about this? And certainly our staff want to do that. But at the same time, you're sitting in a chemistry classroom for a 50-minute chemistry lesson. You need chemistry.
Right.
So it is a balance, but our people do a great job with that. And again, you have to be intentional about it. And we try to do just that to make sure that that Jesus comes through in everything we do.
Larry, if any of our pastors ever go preach in chapel, one thing they should be aware of is that immediately following chapel is lunch. And when the last amen is said, no child is sticking around to say, hey, good job with your sermon, right?
That's right. That final amen is said, you can hear them rustling in the pews before the word amen even happens. They're ready to go to lunch. And it's a tough time slot for our guest pastors, just like in a church. That one of our pastors on staff that you mentioned, Tony Hall, before he was on our staff, he came to speak in chapel. And so I was giving him the rundown, and I said, listen, kids are usually pretty respectful, but one of the worst things you may see out there today is some of the kids slouched over, maybe trying to go to sleep. And he said, "Oh, it's just like my own church. It's no problem. I'm used to that." So, but it's an awesome opportunity to speak in chapel. I mean, you've got a world mission field sitting right in front of you.
You have a world mission field. That's exactly a truer statement could not be spoken. So I don't know what it's like today. In the past, a number of different nations have been represented in that chapel, or nationalities. What does that look like today, Larry?
17 different nations
Wow.
in this year's student body. It would probably be more. We've had a lot of visa issues the last few years, really since COVID, kids getting visas approved. We've had just a little bit over 50 students denied a visa in the last 2 school years. But even still, we still have kids from 17 countries. Our admissions director took a phone call this morning from someone in Canada,
Wow.
and saying that they're interested in connecting with us, sending some kids here. And I asked her, did they say they find us online, or how in the world did they pick out OBI across the United States? And she said, well, the guy had a little bit of a Kentucky tie.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how
Yeah.
kids from around the world find us, but it's really word of mouth is how they typically find us.
I love that. So, Larry, you're leading a large organization with both staff and students. What leadership styles or approaches have you found kind of helpful over the years as a leader?
Well, I've learned some good lessons along the way. I was actually blessed, I'll say, to become a Kentucky Baptist pastor when I was 23 years old.
Okay.
And I had history in the church. My father had been pastor there. So I went to church there as a kid and was working with the youth when the pastor stepped down. And they asked me to be their pastor. It was a warm body, hey, Larry's here and able and warm body, get in there and see how you can do. And boy, I learned some great lessons about people and ministry early on. And those lessons, I think, served me well today. But my last school in Florida, the headmaster there, Dr. John Hunt, is still their headmaster. My son now teaches, my oldest son teaches at that Christian school in Florida. But boy, just such great admiration, respect for Dr. Hunt. He was not dynamic by any stretch. A quiet leader. He just quietly went about his business, took care of his business, did not overreact to things. And with me serving under him, he never really gave me directives, but I always knew what he wanted.
Interesting.
And I respected him enough that if I knew it was what he wanted, I was going to try to get it done for him.
Yeah.
Probably didn't always accomplish that, but I would do my best. So I come out of that setting, which was a more traditional Christian day school, and I come to OBI, and I kind of thought, maybe I'll model, my style of leadership after Dr. Hunt. So early on, I'm trying that here at OBI, and I found very quickly that's not going to work. Like, OBI is a different animal with staff that live here, and we had a much bigger staff than what that school would have had. And I would say I kind of shifted from being a more all-inclusive leadership style of, you give me your input, and happy to hear from everybody. I'm certainly happy to hear from people today. And then I probably shifted early on into a command leadership style, kind of like, hey, what I say goes, and that's what we're going to do. I'd like to think I'm somewhere in the middle now. I would like to think that my leadership is transformational in that I'm trying to set vision and course for our people.
Sure.
And vision's better caught than taught.
Yeah.
Like, they've got to hear it from me and see it from me. So I constantly remind our people of what my heart is for our ministry, and hopefully they'll trust me enough to know he's seeking the Lord in terms of what direction we go. That mission versus methods thing we touched on earlier, remind our staff all the time, don't focus on the methods. Focus on the mission. We have to adjust. We have to make changes. None of us like change. It comes right down to it. But change has been necessary. And so my leadership style has changed over the years. And it's different at OBI than, say, a pastor in a church. In that setting, in reality, in essence, the pastor works for the congregation or answers to the congregation. At OBI, the staff, lack of a better way to put it, they answer to me.
Sure.
And so I want to be an encourager and encourage our people, but at the same time, there are times that you got to make tough decisions. you've got to correct people and redirect folks. And if you don't do that, you're not doing your job.
Right.
And uh, I tell people all the time, the more problematic days are the days that, I'm needed on this campus, that I've kind of earned my keep.
Yeah.
And if I do a good job, our people are taking care of business and doing their job. And I'd like to think now my leadership style is, hey, you'll hear from me every once in a while, but you know where I am if you need me. Keep me informed. If I can help you somehow, let me do that. And I think that's working pretty well for us at OBI.
Larry, I love what you just said there, that to some degree, context determines leadership style. That what would work in Florida at that school would not work at OBI. And you had to kind of probably, to some degree, had to be a little bit of a struggle to figure that out and say this just requires a different approach. And then as the season changes, you're able to have a little different approach. Yeah, I think every leader needs to understand that context rules. And I mean, there's some non-negotiables in how we treat people and care for folks, but context dictates a lot of what's required. Hey, let's make this last question, Larry. OBI is a recipient of cooperative program dollars. That means every church that gives through CP, when they collect up their offering, a portion of it goes to Oneida Baptist Institute. How important is that relationship to you and your ministry?
Vitally important. We value and love our relationship with the Kentucky Baptist Convention, its churches, and the people in those churches.
Yep.
We currently, what comes to us from cooperative program giving amounts to about 15% of our annual budget, and that number's up over the years, and we're appreciative of that. And so as I, early on in this, began to see some of our colleges and universities leave the convention, Dr. Donnie Fox, when he was still at Clear Creek, we talked and said, we need to make sure people know that we're not going anywhere, that we value this relationship. And I say this all the time, and I mean it in all sincerity when I say without Kentucky Baptist, there would be no Oneida Baptist. Mm-hmm. And so it's not all about money or dollars, but it takes dollars to do ministry. Yep. And we're so grateful for that relationship. And although we can quantify the number of dollars that typically come in year to year through the cooperative program, what I cannot quantify are some of those individual donors in Kentucky Baptist churches that I might know that Sally Smith faithfully has sent us $50 a month for 3 decades. But what I maybe don't know is that she's a member of X church. So it's just that 15% that I quoted, that doesn't do it justice, because there's so much more that come directly from churches and in individual giving in those churches.
So Larry, if folks wanted to visit, take a tour, bring a church group to OBI, I assume you'd welcome that. What would they experience when they got there?
Absolutely. We would love that. Love to have groups come, and we're hitting the time of year. It's a great time to do that. The weather's nice. It's usually about a 3 to 4 hour visit. You come in if you can get here on a school day, which is what we encourage you to do, so you can experience the life of the campus and all the students. But you come in, you go to a chapel service, you take a tour of the campus, and we feed you lunch. Yeah. And that usually sometimes leads to, hey, we'd like to come back. How else can we be involved? Yeah. And then they come as a volunteer group. And it's just really a phone call or an email, say, hey, we'd like to come, and we start talking about a date, and we schedule it.
Larry, thank you for answering the call of God on your life, you and Angie together, your entire family, of coming back to OBI, serving there. Thank you for your faithful leadership and your partnership and your friendship, and thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
Thank you, Dr. Gray, for having me on today, and thank you for your leadership in what you do. I've thoroughly enjoyed serving alongside of you these past several years. You're a great leader for Kentucky Baptist. We're blessed to have you. You're a great cheerleader for OBI. You know, you champion our work, and we need more people to do that for us.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Leadership Lessons. An audio podcast of this program is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. The Kentucky Baptist Convention was created by churches for churches to help churches reach Kentucky and the world for Christ. For more information about the KBC and the cooperative program, which fuels our ministry, go to kybaptist.org. We'll see you next time on Leadership Lessons.